What happens when one of Hollywood's most unpredictable actors sits across from one of daytime television's most notoriously combative hosts? You're about to find out. Because Nicolas Cage's appearance on The View didn't just go off the rails, it exploded into one of the most uncomfortable, raw, and unforgettable moments ever captured on live TV. What began as a standard celebrity press stop quickly spiraled into a public confrontation that left the studio silent, the audience stunned, and the internet buzzing for weeks. This wasn't your typical awkward celebrity interview. This was a masterclass in how to completely mishandle a guest, and by the end, everyone watching understood exactly why Nicolas Cage stood up, looked Joy Behar in the eye, and walked off that set. Let's rewind to the beginning. It was supposed to be routine, a quick upbeat segment to promote Cage's latest film. The veteran actor, known for his eccentric performances and larger-than-life personality, arrived early that morning in good spirits. Crew members described him as relaxed, even friendly, shaking hands, cracking jokes, and taking selfies with fans who had gathered outside the studio. Cage was polite, charismatic, and genuinely excited to talk about his work. After all, The View boasted millions of daily viewers, and for any actor pushing a new movie, that kind of exposure was golden. But even before the cameras rolled, something in the air felt off. As Cage stepped onto the stage, the audience erupted in applause, cheering for the man whose name had become synonymous with intensity, unpredictability, and creative daring. Whoopi Goldberg greeted him first, her warm smile breaking the ice. "Nicolas, welcome back to The View. It's always great to have you here." Cage nodded graciously, flashing that trademark grin. "Thank you for having me, Whoopi. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to talk about the new film." But before he could elaborate, Joy Behar cut in, her tone sharp, her expression unreadable. "Before we get to that," she said, flipping through her notes, "I have to ask about some of your past choices. I mean, let's be honest, you've made some pretty questionable movies over the years, haven't you?" The studio fell silent. Even the audience, known for their loud, energetic reactions, seemed caught off guard by her bluntness. Cage froze for a fraction of a second, his smile faltering just slightly. But years of experience in the public eye had trained him to mask discomfort with composure. He sat back, clasped his hands, and replied evenly, "Well, Joy, I think every actor has projects they look back on differently, but I've always tried to bring something unique to every role, whether it's a big-budget film or an indie project. That's part of what makes acting meaningful to me." Joy smirked, clearly unsatisfied. "Unique is one word for it," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. "Some of those performances were so over the top they became memes. Doesn't that embarrass you a little?" Sarah Haynes shifted uneasily in her chair, glancing toward Whoopi, who frowned but stayed silent. For now. Cage chuckled softly, though his eyes told a different story. "I don't think there's anything embarrassing about putting yourself out there creatively," he said. "Acting is about taking risks. Sometimes those risks pay off, sometimes they don't. But I'd rather be remembered for taking chances than for playing it safe." Joy let out a dry laugh. "Come on, Nicolas," she said. "Let's be real here. Some of those roles weren't about taking artistic risks. They were about paying bills. You had some financial troubles a few years ago, right? Is that why you said yes to so many projects? I mean, we've all seen those direct-to-video films." Whoopi's eyes widened. "Joy," she began, trying to intervene, but Joy pressed on, ignoring her co-host's attempt to de-escalate. "You're an Academy Award winner, Nicolas," Joy continued, her voice oozing false sympathy. "Doesn't it bother you that people remember you more for the memes than for Leaving Las Vegas or adaptation?" For the first time, Cage's calm demeanor cracked. He shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. The air in the studio grew heavy. The audience could sense it. The tension, the edge in his voice that suggested the conversation had crossed a line. "Well, Joy," he said slowly, "I'm aware of how people perceive certain things online. But I don't let that define me. My career isn't built on internet reactions. It's built on decades of hard work, storytelling, and passion. I've done over 100 films. Some were hits, some weren't, but I stand by my work." "Even The Wicker Man?" Joy interjected with a mocking grin. A nervous laugh rippled through the audience, but Cage didn't join in. Instead, he stared at Joy, his expression unreadable. "Yes," he said firmly. "Even The Wicker Man. Because every role, even the ones people mock, teaches you something. You find truth in the absurd. You find humanity in the chaos. That's what art is supposed to do. Joy leaned forward. Art? She said, her tone dripping with disbelief. You call screaming about bees art? That was it. The audience groaned. Whoopi rubbed her temples. Even Sonny Hostin muttered under her breath, Okay, that's enough. But Cage didn't raise his voice. He didn't snap back or insult her. Instead, he took a long breath, looked straight into the camera, and said quietly, You know, Joy, I came here today to talk about my new film. A film I'm proud of. A film my entire cast and crew worked hard to make. But it seems like you'd rather talk about the past, about mistakes, about gossip. That's fine, but I don't need to sit here and defend my passion to someone who treats it like a punchline. He stood up. The audience gasped. Nicolas, please, Whoopi said, rising slightly. Let's just... No, Whoopi, Cage interrupted gently. You've always treated your guests with respect, and I appreciate that. But this, he gestured toward Joy, this isn't a conversation. It's an ambush. And I've had enough of those in my career to know when to walk away. He turned toward the crowd, nodded politely and said, Thank you to everyone watching. I hope you check out the film. Have a good day. With that, Nicolas Cage walked off the set, calmly but decisively. The audience sat in stunned silence. Joy tried to laugh it off, muttering something about overreacting, but nobody was laughing. Not even her co-hosts. When the segment cut to commercial, Whoopi reportedly turned to Joy and said, That wasn't journalism. That was personal. And she was right. Within hours, clips of the confrontation flooded social media. Fans and critics alike weighed in. Many praised Cage for his composure, calling him a class act for walking away instead of retaliating. Others condemned Joy for her unprofessionalism and disrespect. The hashtag #CageWalksOut began trending worldwide. By the next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Nicolas Cage storms off the View after heated clash with Joy Behar. But those who watched the full segment knew the truth. He didn't storm off. He simply refused to be disrespected. And in a world that thrives on chaos and confrontation, Nicolas Cage did something far more powerful. He stayed calm, kept his dignity, and walked away on his own terms. The diplomatic smile that had carried Nicolas Cage through the first half of the interview was beginning to fade. In its place came something sharper, harder. A look that suggested the man sitting in that chair was no longer just a polite guest, but a seasoned fighter ready to defend himself. Joy, I think you're oversimplifying things, he said evenly, though there was a new tension in his voice, a subtle warning underneath the calm tone. Yes, I've taken on a variety of projects for different reasons. Some were passion projects, some were commercial ventures, and yes, some were financial necessities. But I've never phoned in a performance. Every single role, no matter how big or small, I gave everything I had. Joy raised an eyebrow, the corners of her mouth curling upward in that familiar smirk that viewers either loved or despised. Everything you had? She repeated, her tone dripping with mock disbelief. Really? Because I've seen some of those movies, and it looked a lot more like you were just cashing checks. The audience let out an uncomfortable murmur. You could feel the energy in the room change. What had started as an awkward exchange was now turning openly hostile. Sonny Hostin quickly jumped in, her voice calm and professional, clearly trying to steer the conversation back onto safer ground. Nicolas, let's talk about your new film, she interjected, flashing a diplomatic smile. What drew you to this particular project? What message are you hoping audiences take away? But Joy wasn't finished. She leaned forward, waving off Sonny's attempt to change the subject. No, wait. I want to finish this thought, she said, her tone firm and almost gleeful, as if she'd found the nerve she wanted to keep pressing. Nicolas, don't you think you owe your fans better than some of the garbage you've put out over the years? The word garbage landed like a slap across the face. The audience collectively gasped. Even Whoopi's jaw tightened, and Sarah Haynes looked like she wished she could vanish into her chair. Cage froze for a split second. Then his eyes flashed, a sudden, unmistakable fire that reminded everyone why he was one of Hollywood's most unpredictable talents. When he spoke, his voice was low, deliberate, and filled with restrained fury. Garbage, he repeated softly, almost tasting the word. Joy, I think you're being incredibly disrespectful. Every project I've worked on employed dozens, sometimes hundreds of people. Every movie, no matter how it was received, was the result of passionate, hardworking individuals trying to tell a story. Joy let out a sharp, dismissive laugh and waved her hand in the air. "Oh, please, don't give me that noble artist routine. You took easy money for easy work, and now you're trying to spin it as some kind of artistic statement." Whoopi sighed audibly, raising a hand. "Joy, maybe we should—" "No, Whoopi," Joy cut her off sharply. "Let me finish." The audience booed quietly, sensing her tone crossing from tough to cruel, but she continued unfazed. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Nicholas, your career has been a roller coaster. You've had your highs, sure, but some of those lows were really low. Don't you think it's time to acknowledge that?" Cage sat back in his chair, studying her carefully. His expression was unreadable, part disbelief, part simmering anger. The silence in the studio was suffocating now. Even the camera operators seemed frozen in place, unsure where to point their lenses. Finally, he spoke. "You know what, Joy?" His tone was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge under every syllable. "I came here to talk about my work, to share something I'm passionate about with your viewers. But instead, you've decided to use this platform to take cheap shots at someone who's been working in this industry for over 30 years. Joy tilted her head, pretending to look surprised. "I'm not tearing you down," she protested lightly, though her grin betrayed her. "I'm just asking honest questions that your fans deserve answers to." "Honest questions?" Cage repeated, his voice rising just slightly. The warmth that usually colored his speech was gone now, replaced by a measured fury. "You're not asking questions, Joy, you're making accusations. And you're doing it under the guise of journalism." The crowd erupted in applause at that, short, hesitant claps that quickly grew louder as the tension thickened. Whoopi glanced at Joy with a warning look, but Joy ignored her, clearly unwilling to back down. "I'm doing my job," Joy replied coolly. "I'm holding you accountable. You're a public figure. People have the right to know why an Oscar winner ends up in so many B-movies." Cage leaned forward now, resting his elbows on the table, his eyes locked onto hers, unblinking, intense. "You want accountability?" he said. "Fine, I've made mistakes. I've taken roles that maybe weren't the smartest career moves. But I've worked. I've shown up. I've delivered. Because that's what professionals do. That's what artists do. You want to talk about accountability? Try walking a mile in my shoes. Joy. Try carrying the weight of expectation, the pressure of family legacy, the scrutiny of millions, and still finding the strength to keep creating." His words hung in the air, heavy and raw. For a long moment, Joy said nothing. Then she let out a small scoff, shaking her head. "So now you're the victim?" she asked. "That's the narrative you're going with?" Whoopi leaned forward, finally unable to stay silent. "Joy, enough," she said firmly. "This isn't productive," but Cage wasn't done either. His voice, though steady, carried the full weight of years spent defending his art. "I'm not a victim," he said. "I'm a human being. I've dedicated my life to this craft, to storytelling, to performance, to the pursuit of something real. And if that means sometimes falling flat, so be it. Failure is part of creation. But sitting here listening to you reduce all of that to garbage, that's not journalism, Joy, that's just cruelty." The audience broke into applause again, louder this time, more sustained. Even Sonny nodded in silent agreement. Joy forced a tight smile, clearly flustered but unwilling to back down completely. "Well," she said, "I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree." Cage gave a short, humorless laugh. "No, Joy," he said quietly. "We don't have to agree, but we should respect each other. That's the difference between a conversation and a confrontation. And from where I'm sitting, this stopped being a conversation a long time ago." He pushed his chair back slightly, not standing yet, but sending a clear signal that he was done playing along. The audience held its breath. Whoopi glanced toward the producers offstage, clearly debating whether to cut to commercial. Cage looked directly at Joy one last time. "You know, I've been called eccentric, intense, unpredictable, and maybe that's fair. But the one thing I've never been is insincere. Every film, every role, every performance, I meant it. And that's more than I can say for the questions you've asked today." The studio went silent again. You could almost hear the hum of the lights overhead. Joy looked momentarily speechless, a rare sight on the view. And then, without waiting for anyone's cue, Nicolas Cage stood up. Calmly, deliberately, he adjusted his jacket, gave a polite nod to the audience, and said, "I think we're done here." Whoopi sighed, half resigned, half impressed. "Can't say I blame you," she muttered under her breath as the audience erupted, some in applause, some in shock. And with that, Nicolas Cage walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned studio, a visibly rattled Joy Behar, and one of the most talked-about moments in The View's history. The other hosts looked like they wanted to disappear. Sunny stared down at the table, fiddling nervously with her pen. Sarah's eyes darted toward the camera crew as if silently begging someone, anyone, to cut to commercial. But the director didn't. The red light stayed on. Millions of viewers were watching, and Nicolas Cage had clearly reached his breaking point. "You want to know something about taking risks, Joy?" he said, his voice rising, not in a shout, but with the unmistakable weight of conviction. "Every time an actor steps in front of a camera, they're taking a risk. Every single time. Every time we commit to a character, we're putting our reputation, our credibility, and sometimes our entire career on the line. And yes, sometimes those risks don't pay off the way we hoped. But at least we're out there trying, creating, contributing something to the world." The audience applauded lightly, unsure whether to cheer or stay silent. Joy crossed her arms, her tone sharp and mocking. "Oh, please. Don't act like you're some kind of martyr for art. You made bad movies for money, plain and simple." Cage turned toward her fully now, the warmth gone from his face. His voice dropped low, steady as steel. "And what do you make, Joy?" Joy blinked, caught off guard. "What do you contribute?" Cage continued, his tone cutting through the silence. "You sit here and tear down people who are actually doing something. People who risk failure, embarrassment, ridicule, all in the name of creativity. What do you risk, Joy? You offer nothing constructive, nothing helpful, nothing that makes the world even slightly better." A murmur rippled through the audience. Even Whoopi raised an eyebrow. Joy's face flushed red, but she forced a strained smile. "I provide commentary," she said tightly. "I provide perspective." Cage leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "No," he said quietly. "You provide meanness. You provide cruelty disguised as insight. And the worst part is, you seem to enjoy it." The room went dead silent. Sonny Huston, sensing that the interview was spiraling beyond repair, jumped in desperately. "Nicolas, Joy," she said, forcing a bright professional tone. "I think we're all getting a little heated here. Maybe we should heat it?" Cage turned toward her, his expression softening slightly. "Sonny, I came here in good faith. I prepared for this interview. I was ready to talk about my work, about the film, about the industry, anything your viewers might find meaningful or inspiring. But instead, I've been subjected to a character assassination disguised as journalism." He turned back to Joy, and the fire returned to his eyes. "You want to know what's really embarrassing, Joy?" he asked. "It's not taking on challenging roles that don't always land perfectly. It's not trying new things and occasionally failing. What's embarrassing is being so bitter, so consumed by negativity, that you can't even pretend to be civil to a guest on your own show." The audience burst into applause now, louder, more certain this time. It wasn't polite clapping. It was agreement. Joy's jaw tightened. "I don't have to pretend anything," she snapped. "This is my show, and if you don't like my questions, you can leave." Cage tilted his head, then slowly looked around at the other hosts. "Your show?" he asked softly. "Last I checked, this was called The View, not the Joy Behar Hour." That got a laugh from the audience, but Cage didn't smile. His expression was cold, deliberate. "But you're right about one thing," he said. "If you don't want to have a respectful conversation, I absolutely can leave." Whoopi finally stepped in, her voice calm but strained. "Nicolas, please, let's just—" "No, Whoopi," Cage said, holding up a hand. His tone had shifted again, no longer angry but resolute, almost serene. "It's okay. I understand what this is now." He gestured lightly toward Joy. "This isn't an interview. It's an ambush, and I don't participate in ambushes." Joy leaned forward, sensing victory, her eyes glittering. "So you're just going to run away when things get tough?" she said, a triumphant edge in her voice. Cage's composure cracked for the first time. His voice came out louder now, emotion breaking through. "Run away?" he repeated incredulously. "Joy, I've been sitting here for 15 minutes while you've done everything in your power to humiliate me on national television. I've answered your questions. I've defended my choices. I've tried to remain civil in the face of open hostility. If walking away from a toxic situation is your definition of running away, then yes, by all means. I'm running. The crowd erupted again, some cheering, some gasping. Joy muttered under her breath, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Typical Hollywood prima donna. That did it. The applause died instantly. The air seemed to thicken. Cage froze mid-motion, his hand still resting on the table. Slowly, he turned his head toward her. His face was completely still now, his expression unreadable. Prima donna, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air like a knife. Then he stood. Slowly. Deliberately. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor echoed through the silent studio. Joy, he said, his voice icy and controlled. Let me tell you what a prima donna actually is. He took a step closer, not menacing, but commanding, his presence filling the room. A prima donna is someone who demands special treatment. Someone who throws tantrums when they don't get their way. Someone who believes the world revolves around them. Joy tried to speak, but Cage didn't stop. A prima donna, he continued, his tone like cold steel, is someone who thinks their opinion is so important that they can treat others like garbage and call it journalism. The audience gasped again, followed by a smattering of applause that quickly grew into thunderous clapping. Joy's face was beet red now, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for words that wouldn't come. Whoopi looked off stage, clearly signaling for a commercial break. But Cage didn't wait. He straightened his jacket, gave a small courteous nod to Sunny and Whoopi, then looked back at Joy one last time. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I hope one day you remember that the people you tear down are still human beings. We make mistakes. We grow, we try. That's all any of us can do, and with that he walked off. No shouting. No dramatics. Just quiet dignity. The studio audience rose to its feet, clapping and cheering as Joy sat frozen behind the desk, staring after him. When the cameras finally cut to commercial, Whoopi exhaled deeply and muttered, Well, that was something. Sunny shook her head. That was a man defending his dignity, she said softly. And Joy, still red-faced, sat in silence, knowing that the moment would follow her far beyond that studio, long after the applause had faded.